Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Jen Jones. I'm the VP of Career Development. And before we jump in and get started, I wanted to share one of our company's core values with you guys because I've been here for about 9 years. It's one that has really continued to resonate with me personally. We believe the quickest way to grow our company is to grow our people. And I know I, for one, am very, very thankful to work for a company that believes in leadership development and agent development through our career development team and all of our offerings. It is really that belief that has empowered us to deliver our Accelerate program, our webinar training marathon days, and these expert panels. So I just wanted to take a second and share that before we jump in and get started. We are going to do a Land More Listings expert panel today. For those of you who have never done a panel via webinar, there is a chat box. There's also a question and answer box. So as we go through everything today, please use the chat box, type in your questions. I will be monitoring the chat box throughout the session today and feeding those questions to our panelists. It's recorded. It will be posted on Team Home Sale so that we can also all take advantage of that recording and go back and watch it. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. And Lisa, do you want to kick us off with just introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Lisa Naples. I work out of North Point. I'm in my 18th year, and I'm really happy to be here.
Mark?
Hey everybody, my name is Mark Carr. I'm from the East York office in the Land Farway in York County. I'm one of the partners of the Karr Cleaver Pendergast team. I've been selling real estate for 25 years, and our primary goal, quite frankly, is learn to list and list to last. That is really our motto for our team. So about 82% of my personal business is listings, or are listings, if that's proper English. So this is one of my passions, and I'm excited to share some cool things with you today. So hope you enjoy.
Okay, Shane?
Hi, good morning. I'm Shane Kuhns. I work out of the Centerville office with the Jim Pappas team. Currently working on my 6th year in real estate, and I'm working on growing and scaling a team.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for your willingness to share today. I'm excited to just jump in and get started. So again, everybody attending, feel free to use that chat box. We're going to start with just prepping for the appointment. So you guys schedule a listing appointment. What are the first couple things that you start working on and start doing? Go ahead, chime in, and then you can kind of layer onto each other.
So one of the first things that I'm going to keep in mind is I do not do a whole lot of front end research on the property itself. Obviously, I need to know where it is, neighborhood, things like that. I've been in situations where I've done a ton of front end research, walked into the property, and it's 1,000 square feet bigger than it was 5 years ago, and really I know nothing about the property. So I like going in kind of cold with no first impressions before I get there. And I make that preparation is more about the client than anything, being able to engage in a conversation with them. And the number one goal in that first meeting is building rapport for me. That's what's most important.
So for me, I'm actually the polar opposite. I like to do a one-step listing process. I know there are some folks out there that do a two-step listing process. As far as I'm concerned, my philosophy is they're reaching out to us for the expertise, for the knowledge, for the information. And so for me, what I've found successful is knowing the market, knowing their area, knowing what their neighbors have sold for, what Zillow says their house is worth, going in there with all that information, because frankly, the best way to build a rapport in my business or in my situation is through facts, because that really takes down the barrier of the salesman or this is a sales pitch, because the more facts and the more statistics you give them, the more likely they are to really sign on to you because they know you've done your work, plus you're giving them information they've already may have researched. So for me, I'm pretty much looking up every single thing, not to get into full details, but the number one thing for you to do if you go into a listing appointment is do a geo search of the exact neighborhood and go back 5 years. 5 years. People are like, why would you do 5 years? The comps don't matter, blah, blah, blah. Well, believe it or not, most sellers think that their neighbor's house sold like last year in the 6 months, but in actuality it's like 3.5 years ago. Because I've done that in the very beginning where I'm like, gosh, I did all the comps. I can't even find this thing. Of course I go back, it's like 4 or 5 years old. So what's nice about that is when they do bring up that property, you're prepared and you're like, well, that's great, but that actually sold in 2014. And of course, they shake their head. So for me, I go in as prepared as possible for everything about their property. And Shane's correct. It is difficult to really know exactly what you're getting into. But so I really do the spread of, is this house, I basically comp it in 3 different comps. One, if it's in like a hog pen where like it'll only sell as is, it doesn't matter. 2, with what, normally would be is if it's a little bit updated or at least up to standard, and I comp it that way. And then 3, I comp it if this thing is like so awesome and they really have gone over and above, their marketplace or their development. I think that way, if you create those 3 different price points, you're going to cover yourself in that spread. So I like to do, plus I'm antsy by nature, so to do 2 appointments with the same person is sort of a little against my ADD. So, but yeah, I like to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah, I'm with Mark. I think I like to ask the seller questions before, at the time we're setting up the appointment about their house and if they've made changes, because the MLS is awesome. You can look back at the history of properties. If it's sold and it's in the MLS, you can see what it used to look like. So it's good to find out what might be different ahead of time. I try to be prepared to have stats, sort of a bird's eye view of the neighborhood, and be able to speak about average days on market, average price per square foot. But, so I like to have all of those things at my fingertips during the meeting, but not every seller wants to hear all of that, but it's good to have it. So you have to gauge the people when you're sitting there. Some people just aren't going to be interested in the stats, but you want to have them because when you need them, you need them.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's especially important for new to business agents who might be walking in there with less experience. And I know, Mark, you talked about that a little bit when we did the panel in person of how important it is for them when they can't go, hey, I've been in the business 5 years, 10 years, to come ready with those stats and that information.
Yeah. And there are some great programs out there. Like if you really, when I started, I relied on the company's experience and the company's sales. So again, when I geotag or geofence that development, I'm pulling up how many properties Berkshire Hathaway sold there within the last 5 years. I do 5 years. Again, not only does it bolster the numbers, but it allows you to, really, really show your expertise. And if you weren't the seller, you weren't the listing agent, it shows that you're behind the company. And so always utilize the company stats, if you're new to the business. So, because my biggest fear when I was new was like, how many have you sold? And of course I'm like scared to death. I sold like 3 properties, and in actuality I say, well, our company sold over 75% of your development in the last 5 years. So seems to me we know what we're doing, and we specialize in this area. It's tough for the sellers to really argue that way. And, as you noticed, I didn't say anything about how many I sold there. So it's key.
Right. Yep. It was a good way to answer the question. Somebody had chimed in and asked, are there ways to print reports from the MLS that are more of that bird's eye view? Like where are you guys pulling those stats, or what reports are you bringing with you? Like what are you either compiling for your knowledge so that you can speak to that, or printing out, bringing to the appointments? What systems are you guys using to prep all of that?
I like the market statistics report in Bright. So you can go under that tab and you can pick a geographic area. So that's a more broad way to look at things, but I like to compare that to the comps that I use. And when I whatever comps I've selected, I also print out the statistics for that creates the days on market average and the average and median sale prices. And I compare those comps to the geographic area. Those are the key ones, just to say, so, here's what's happening in your school district, here's what's happening in your township, here's what's happening in your neighborhood.
Yeah, for me, the docs that I really do is obviously the in-tax report. That's sort of ground zero. Then I will pull up all the agent one page for all the comps. And then I actually spill all of those into the Cloud CMA Access. The reason why I do this Cloud CMA, I don't print it out because it's like 40 some pages and it takes forever. I use it on my iPad because if someone's asking about it, that actually has a cool little like graphic where it puts all the solds there. So it's an easy reference just to go hit it. Plus, if you want to go look to see what the insides of those properties are, they have all the pictures right there. So you're not like fumbling through because I'm not sure, maybe you guys aren't like me, but I'm still not in love with this Bright MLS system for its user friendliness. So the Cloud CMA is just an awesome tool because it really encompasses everything there. That works out. But the one golden goose that I use, and I think Jen liked this from one of my other presentations, is I'll go on homesale.com and I'll type in the address to find out what your house is worth. And I'll do a screenshot of whatever those three values are, because that's such a great way to lead yourself into my line is, so let's see what the expert thinks your house is worth, which, is obviously you can hear my satire, my sarcasm in that. But it's great because not only does it show the Zillow, and I'm not even sure the other two. It used to be Collateral or Collateral Analytics.
Yep.
And then
Collateral Analytics, Zillow, RPR, and then there are a couple other sites that will populate through now too.
So really what that does, it sets the stage, knowing that you've done the research on what the AVM models out there will say. Plus it gives such a huge, variation, it disproves it right away. So those two, if there's two things, definitely put all of your info in the Cloud CMA and have it ready on your laptop or iPad, and definitely do the homesale.com, print that in there and do a screenshot because it's pretty cool.
Yep, and you can do it that way with a screenshot. You can also do it in BuySide. BuySide's a newer system that we launched a couple months ago. That actually does exactly what Mark is saying. It uses the same exact system, and it does create a really nice report with a couple of pages of the value estimators, and then it also has additional stats like how many buyers are connected to our agents. So it also kind of has the power of, well, Homesale has 30 buyers that are a potential match for this listing. So it has some additional stats in there that you guys can leverage. But go ahead, Shane.
So I typically, like Mark, I typically rely heavily on the CMA that's created directly through Bright. As cumbersome as it may be, it's raw data, which no one can argue with. And then I use RPR as well. And to kind of piggyback on what Mark said, it gives you such a wide range of pricing that you can kind of tailor the conversation to their goal, to that client, and what their ultimate goals are. So I like RPR. It's not as accurate as it should be or could be, but that works to my benefit more often than not. So relying on that, and then always taking a Zestimate with you is a good idea. So yeah, those are the three go-tos for me.
I'd just like to interject. RPR is not the best, but one really great thing to use it for is if there's a neighborhood where there's been a lot of private sales, it's a quick way to find out everything that's sold. There's a condo community near us that I think half of the condos sell privately. So if you want to quickly see prices, RPR is the way to go.
Yeah, and that's the great reason why, you definitely do that geofencing of the neighborhood, because, the in-tax report is going to give all of that, not necessarily the MLS. But, and that, again, as you said, Lisa, it's great because you're showing your knowledge of that area, which qualifies you so fast.
Yep, I think that's awesome. Okay, so a couple of things just from the seller's point of view, when they're talking with you guys before the appointment and they're asking you, what do I need to be prepared for? Is there anything I need to do? And really in their head, you're knowing, okay, are they going to go through and start moving things around in their house and changing things? Like, what advice do you guys like to give them before you even get there?
So for me, Mark kind of talked about the 2 appointment approach to the listing. It's often the approach that I take. So if a client asks, how should they prepare for our appointment? I typically tell them to do nothing. I want to see the house as it is. And I don't want them to feel like they need to do work just to meet me. And I'm not their buyer, right? So in most cases anyway, so I really don't want them to do a ton of work to cover up anything. I really want to see the house as it is. And then we can kind of go from there with suggestions and, less is more approach.
Yeah, I like that concept too. So I don't do an enormous amount of talking on the pregame or the pre-listing appointment. And the reason why I say that is I want to go in and see sort of the authentic property. And I think it's more difficult to build rapport over the telephone than it is in person. And so for me, I think the keys, but I do ask them to have three things for me. The first and foremost is I ask them to get an updated mortgage payoff for their house. And of course, my question is, are you guys still carrying a mortgage on this property? Because number one, I don't want to assume, but when they say, no, we own it cash, well, sort of my antlers go up because, obviously that means, we have a little bit more of a latitude there. The second thing that I ask them is to write down or jot down the list of things they think they need to do to get the house camera ready. Now I use that word camera ready instead of for showings because I talk about the difference between camera ready and showing ready, because camera ready is really sort of like when you suck your gut in and, you pin your shoulders back and make sure, showing ready is sort of just, making sure you brush your teeth, did all that stuff. So I like that. And then the third thing that's really important to me is I want to know what their game plan is. And so I ask them, I don't like it to be a presentation. I like it to be more of like a Q&A. So I ask them to say, please write down as many questions that you have in your head before we get there, because I've done this a million times and I'd rather answer your questions than do my presentation. And so that's just a cool way to just say that you're interested in their situation, not just you getting there and doing this presentation. So those are really the three big boys that I ask.
I have a question for you, Mark.
Yes.
So how often do the sellers do these three things exactly what you request?
Almost verbatim,
Okay.
almost all the time. Yeah. Here's the one thing that I don't like to ask. I don't want to know what improvements and what upgrades they've done to the house prior to me getting there. And I'll explain to you why. If they give you that whole list of all the things that they've done and, that they're proud of, it eliminates you an opportunity to build that extra piece of rapport when you're walking through the property with them. Because if you point out, and you guys, we all know what good features are, what quality features are, and we all know what the costs associated are. So if you point out something that they've done, whether it's the beveled edged, granite, or it's the hand scraped hardwood floors, when you point those things out, as opposed to them telling you, that again is another subliminal way for them to qualify you like, man, this person knows what they're talking about. Plus, if you can bring up, painting is a great thing, so if someone says, oh yeah, I painted my house myself. Well, it wasn't a graceful process. And so, and you can tell like if the lines are cut in real tight or if it's sloppy, so if you can point that out, say, my gosh, you really took your time, the lines are all cut in nice, blah, blah, blah. Again, that's another way to build that rapport with that individual as opposed to them telling you what they did. So, but yeah, it's huge for me to have those questions ready because again, our key right now in this business is really to facilitate getting the house ready for sale. Not so much about the marketing anymore. For me, I think it's getting the house ready for sale is the number one step. And so if they think they have to do a bunch of different things and you can eliminate those for them, it shows that you're looking out for them. Plus it gives them a sense of alleviation from it. So, but yeah, it works almost, all the time. So, and if they don't have it ready, Lisa, I say, oh my gosh, you guys are ready to sign the listing contract. This is great. Of course, as a joke. So, but did that help?
I think so. I tend to lean more towards Shane. I don't want to burden them with preparations for our appointment, but I think your three questions are very good. So I'm going to have to give that some thought. Yeah.
And it's not a huge burden because truth of the matter is you're asking them how much, are they still carrying a mortgage? And if so, get the final payoff so I can show them exactly how much money they have when we sell the property. The second thing, quite frankly, is make a list of items that you think you need to do to get your house camera ready, because I can show you what's important and what's not important on that list. And again, the third thing is have your questions ready for me, because I want this to be more of a question and answer session than it is a presentation, So, here's a good statement. How many times have you guys been on a listing appointment and you guys get there and the husband or wife has that notepad out and you're halfway to 3/4 through the way, they haven't written a goddamn thing down? Have you guys ever had that happen?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, so to me, I'm like, God, they're not even paying attention, or, I haven't given them any great information. So if you have them prepare their questions and you answer the questions, it's just another way to get them down to that funnel where they, sign on. So
that's a very efficient and quick way to find out what their goals are as well. Why are you really sitting in front of them? And they'll probably reveal that early on. And reading the room during those listing presentations, and you're talking about Home Sale Magazine online, and you're talking about Zillow views, and someone's zoned off into space. They don't care, so it does sound like a great way to find out what's very important to them very quickly.
So here's the final piece about those questions. This is a great way, if you're having a hard time getting this property sold, or you're not getting the showings coming through, it is the great way to wheel that thing back out about 60 to 90 days into the conversation and say, you know what, when we met, you guys wanted to make sure that you were moved by this amount of time, or, hey, we wanted to sort of net this amount of money, or, and so it's just a great way to wheel that thing back out and solidify, asking for a price improvement, or, paint, or do something along those lines. So again, it's just a perfect way to sort of, say, listen, this is what you told me in the beginning. Has something changed? And they say, no, it hasn't. Well, then, okay, let's, get this thing moving. So.
Okay. So when you guys first get there for the appointment, walk us through kind of your first steps.
I think my process for that first meeting starts before I even get in the door. I'm always looking for quick ways to build rapport. Sometimes these people have no idea who I am, and that's okay. But when I'm walking up to the door, I'm taking a look at the property, but I'm also looking for things to talk about with the seller. Do they have, a sports team license plate, or do they have stickers on their car that reveal anything about them that I can use to talk to them? Like I said before, when I get there, my first priority is building rapport with the client. I need them to, or the potential client, I need them to feel comfortable with me. And that's my goal. Once I get in the door, then obviously, I always ask them to take me around, show me the property, and I'm taking notes, features, things like that. But I'm also talking to the client about things they've done. Like Mark said, I'm pointing out, nice features of the home, keeping the conversation very positive. And that's really my process.
Okay, Mark, Lisa, anything you would add to that, or that you do slightly differently?
Go ahead, Lisa, and then I'll finish up. Go ahead.
I like to start with a tour. And to Mark's earlier point, the sellers do take note of your reaction to their house, looking for positive cues and looking for acknowledgement of the materials. And, of course, not every house is going to have upgrades that you're going to ooh and ah about, but you have to engage the sellers in your knowledge of what they have. And then I come prepared to do a more formal presentation, but I gauge how I'm interacting with the sellers, if it's going to be more of a conversation or more of a presentation, depending on how they're reacting. So I like to start with the tour so we know what their house contains, and then I like to sit down at a table with my iPad and my notepad and get started. And then, the way that the conversation and presentation flows totally depends on who the sellers are.
Yeah. As soon as you get there, the worst thing you can do is sort of start into your routine, or let's get down to business. Here's a great as you guys are going to find out, there's a lot of subtleties and a lot of subliminal or, unspoken things that gain you that rapport. For me, the first and foremost thing that I do as soon as I walk in the door, I'm looking to see if these clients have their shoes on. So if they don't have their shoes on, I don't even ask. I take my shoes off. And if they do have their shoes on, I still ask, say, would you prefer that I take my shoes off to walk through the house? Again, it's that immediate thing that it's just like, wow, this guy is, respecting in my house already. And I actually, when I walk through the property, I don't take notes. I don't take write down notes or my iPad, because again, I want to make sure that I'm making conversation with the client as opposed to trying to jot down, oh, there's, basket weave tile in the bathroom. And, oh, they did, so and I explained to them why I'm walking through, say, guys, the reason why I'm doing this walkthrough, not only to see your house, is I want to see how the floor plan flows. I want to see if you've done any improvements, that would be beneficial to the clients. And I also want to see if there's anything that we can do to spruce it up that won't cost us an arm and a leg to get more money out of the transaction. And so I utilize that when I'm walking through. And so that, again, I can remember things as I'm going through my presentation about a certain one or two different, features that are important. So, but again, the easiest thing to gain respect, I know it's silly, is to, just say, do you mind, would you like me to take my shoes off? And if they already have their shoes off, just go do it a while, because honestly, I live in a house that has 5 dogs that have the dirtiest paws in the universe, but my wife won't let me walk through this house with my shoes on. So, I know, the value of, respecting someone's floors. So, but hopefully that helps.
Yep. So once you guys do your walkthrough and you're starting to actually sit down at the table with them, what does your process look like for that? I know you guys have all kind of in a different way mentioned, well, we start with their questions, or it depends on them and it depends maybe on their personality. Can you guys speak to how are you determining that? How are you determining what the flow of that should look like based on the person sitting across from you?
Yeah, so I do it in 3 stages. And so I basically, as we sit down and say, hey guys, today I want to accomplish a few things. First and foremost, obviously I want to introduce you to myself, and then of course I'm very self-deprecating when I'm there. So I'm saying, which by the way is the worst part of this presentation. So it's not going to be very long, so I don't want them to think I'm coming in or some big shot that has the #1 team and, blah, 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 blah. And then I say the second thing I'd like to do is discuss the pricing of your home. And then the third thing I like to do is go over the marketing of your home, because if we arrive at a price that you guys are comfortable with, I think it's important for you to see how I'm going to get that price for you. And so I break it down into 3 basic areas. And then before I get started with that, I say, but before we get started, let's talk a little bit. What has you guys, what has me here? And I really want to find out why am I there? And, if my assistant doesn't ask when she sets the appointment, I want to ask them when I'm there, because it's important to know not only where you're getting your business, but it's important to know where sellers are looking before they even call you. So I basically start out with the 3 steps, what I'm going to do there, but then I ask them what their scenarios are and different things like that first. So, and now that is the time that I take really, really strong notes. And so when they're talking, again, here's another little subtlety that I always say, sorry guys, I'm a big note taker. So I hope you don't mind me jotting down things while you guys talk. Again, that's another way for when people are talking and you're sitting down face to face, it makes them feel as if you're paying attention, which usually I'm not, because I'm looking at the dog or the cat that's gnawing at my legs or something. But that's how I usually set up the system.
I have a form that I bring to every listing appointment. I staple the tax card, a previous MLS sheet to it. That's my starting point for any listing. And so I can quickly refer to those facts if I need to, but then I have a set list of questions. So I sit down with the sellers, and my first goal is to have a conversation with them, learn more about the house, learn more about their goals. And I also ask permission or not permission, but say, I'm going to take some notes so that I can remember everything that we talk about. And I fill in answers to the questions, sometimes in any order. and that helps me remember to ask things about homeowners associations, appliances that are going to stay, those things that you don't want to forget to ask. My best question, I think, is what is your biggest concern about this move? And then you find out, is it price, timing, something you never would have expected? When I'm finished with that conversation is when I do, if I need to, I do a more formal presentation on my iPad, which is not that many slides. I think it's fewer than 20. And I tell them I just want to review the marketing so you understand everything that I'm going to do to get your house sold. I'm not going to bore you with these slides. So some of them we go pretty quickly through, but if they're interviewing more than one agent, I wouldn't want them to think they're not getting some of those things just because we never got to that part of the presentation.
Yeah, and before Shane jumps in, I wanted to just answer, I think there are two over here in the chat.
Yep.
Chat bar.
Go ahead.
So I am 100% always assuming they're interviewing other agents. And I even bring it up. Now, I don't ask, are you interviewing other agents? I basically assume that they have. And so I like to say, boy, I said, again, it's more of a joke along the line, say, am I the first agent that you guys have been here, or have you heard the agent spiel plenty of times that, you're ready to, jump off a bridge? Because again, if they say they haven't interviewed agents, I'm bringing it up that it's a great idea to consider doing that, because again, you have to be confident in what your presentation is. And if you can even point out, why the advantage of interviewing other agents is there, again, it shows that it gives you that extra rapport. And I basically say, listen, the whole purpose of interviewing agents is twofold. One is you'll get a good idea what the price of your home is, because each agent's going to have their own opinion, and usually you'll find some sort of like common line from there. And then secondly, the real reason why you're interviewing the agent is to find out who you're most likely to be in line with and feel that can get the job done for you. Because at the end of the day, this is a team effort. It's not I'm working for you, it's I'm working with you, because if we don't sell, frankly, we don't get paid. And if we don't sell, it doesn't help us down the road because we lose our, referral streams and things like that. So I really bring that up. And I think Anne-Marie asked if I talk about interviewing other agents. And then Kathy asked something about why am I here? The key is I want to find out what's most important to them. Is it timing, getting the house sold in a short amount of time, or is it getting the most amount, for the house because their neighbors sold for, usually this is the $1,000 thing that happens. A rancher will sell in the development for like $350,000, and then a poor old two-story is worth like about $225,000. And, so they're going to think their house is worth $300 something, So I want to find out what's their goal, because I want to speak to that. And exactly what Lisa said, you want to get what their important ideas are and what's their whole motivation, because if you think about it, guys, just do a role reversal. If you're interviewing a realtor to sell your exact house that you live into, do you really want to hear about statistics and marketing and all that other bullshit? You want to get to the point where, I'm sorry, Jen, can you bleep out my swear word? Okay.
No, but maybe for the recording, I can work on that.
Sorry, Chris Thomas is going to get me. So, they really, as they want to know what their house is worth. I mean, you want to get right to the point, So, again, so those questions, more of an informal Q&A as opposed to presentation, is going to take you a long way.
Yeah.
So,
all right, Shane, before you chime in, turn your volume up just a little bit, and then go for it.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So oftentimes my first question when we after the tour, we sit down at the table. My first question is typically, what are your goals? As far as this process is concerned, what is your ultimate goal? And like Mark said earlier, it's something that you can bring back out of a conversation to talk about that price adjustment. Hey, let's not forget about the goal, right? What is the goal? So I like to know that very early on, and then I will tailor my presentation to that goal. If they want to know if their goal is to have their home marketed everywhere, then we'll talk about the marketing. If your goal is a price, I'll kind of walk through my listing presentation on how we get to that price. If the goal is timing, how can we sell quickly? Well, that's going to determine the price conversation as well. So what their goal is will often determine exactly what I talk about, what I show them, what slides I skip or don't skip. And I really try to tailor the conversation to their goal. And I'm watching, body language. And, when I start talking about marketing, are they dozing off or looking out the window? Well, then I kind of steer the conversation back and try to really tailor it to their goal. And some of these questions, why am I here? So the goal, right? It's all about the goal. Why is the seller interviewing agents? And like Mark said, I always assume they're interviewing other agents. And sometimes, depending on the room, I will advise them to interview multiple agents, because if we're not a good fit, we're not going to enjoy this at all. The process, the conversations, anything. And we often forget that while the listing is the prize, sometimes you have to set up the situation that you're the prize and not the listing, right? Just to kind of gain control of that conversation. Because, there's 1,400, 1,500 realtors in Lancaster County alone. So of course they're going to interview other agents, but kind of flipping the script and making you the prize rather than the listing. And telling them to interview other agents is a good way to do that. So, yeah.
Yep. I like that approach. And that way it's not portraying you guys as so focused on getting the listing and getting the commission. It's kind of creating almost like a standard for you. And hey, I want to work with the people that want to work with me. And that is important, that it's the right fit.
Right.
One question came in, and this was my next question for you guys too. So Trisha asked, do you all have a listing presentation you share with the sellers? And then she kind of said, I feel like they zone out when I get to that step. The way I was going to ask that was, when you talked about the marketing component, are there key slides or key pieces that you guys are using as your go-to elements of, here's how I market this property?
So I actually use a majority of the listing presentation that's available on Home Sales Center. I've removed and replaced some of those to tailor specifically to the team. Mm-hmm. And, there are a couple of things that we do differently than some other agents. So those things are sprinkled in there, but I think our company does such a great job of, once we land a listing, the organic marketing is phenomenal. So I usually don't stray too far from that, but I will let them know what we do as a team specifically that some other agents may not do, if they're interested in the marketing. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that you have to be, number one, your presentation can't be too lengthy. You have to hone in on what's important, and you have to practice it so that you're not a bore, so that you can kind of look at the slide, maybe interject something funny or important in a way that they're interested and they're learning. I want them to learn about the marketing. I want them to be learning about the process of, showings, and it's just so that they're as prepared as they can be. But you do have to practice the presentation. Otherwise, they're going to fall asleep.
Yeah, that is, oh my gosh, Lisa, that's so funny you say that, because I remember when I first started in the real estate business, my mother was in the real estate moons ago, and she wanted a listing appointment with a realtor, and they went slide by slide through every stinking thing. And these people were ready to sign like in the first 10 minutes. And my mom's like, oh my gosh, this person just could not help themselves. They just needed to get through every slide. So that's something I always remember, is like, know when to shut it down. I mean, holy smokes. But I 100%, I use an iPad Pro, which is by far probably one of the best tools out there. And I use it as a crutch, not as my main focus of the presentation. And I'll use the slides accordingly to what we're talking about. But yep. The one cool little, again, here's Mark's little subliminal messages here. One cool thing with the iPad Pro is the iPencil works right on the screen. So if people are bored, when you start like drawing stuff on screens and like highlighting and doing things that they're not used to seeing, they like it's like a cat following like a laser beam, it's like, ooh, this guy, and so it's really important, so if you're highlighting, or just doing something, it's just such a great little subliminal way to just show that you're tech savvy or you're doing something above and beyond. But what did one person say? I would never, ever, under any pretenses, leave my listing presentation with the clients. So if somebody wants the listing presentation, my canned response is, I used to leave this with people, but unfortunately I got burnt because someone told me they were going to list with me, but then I found out they went with another realtor, and lo and behold, that realtor copied every single marketing thing that I did. So I'm sorry, but when we list the property, I'll give you a detailed marketing proposal so you can follow along each and every step of the way. So, but you have to have a designated listing presentation that you can use as like an asset or a crutch through the transaction or through the presentation.
Yep. So you guys kind of shared some of the marketing pieces, like Shane sharing that you guys are using the organic traffic and how we are getting their listing in front of all of these potential buyers. Are there any other key elements that you are, whether it's specific company slides and information or yours, are there any other key elements that you're making sure to cover if it is somebody that is into the marketing as a concern?
Yeah, I think you have to 100% hit on your digital marketing, because at the end of the day, we really are left with nothing else but digital marketing. I mean, our poor newspaper print has gone by the wayside. Our lovely home sale magazine is now digitalized. Take one flyers aren't quite that great, So I think it's important that you highlight what you're going to do digitally, and it's going to be basically whether it's the internet, social media, and direct email campaigning, or whatever it is to market the property. But I am like Shane. I have usurped some of the home sale slides that are on Team Home Sale, not only because they're designed well, and I'm real picky about my design, but they also are great in terms of the coverage of like how far our companies span, in the maps, and just like traffic and different things like that. But it's huge. If you're not talking about how you're going to market them online or social media, you're cooked. You just really are.
I think
Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
The market share is one of the key slides. I mean, there's no one who can compare to Berkshire Hathaway's market share, and I think it's really impressive. Of course, there's a lot of other slides, but that's a definite inclusion.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. What has kind of really stood out to you guys that you felt has made a difference for you?
That's actually one of the first slides I start out with, because not only is it a great look, but then I take it one step further. I say, here's why I'm showing you this, because if Berkshire is doing X amount of the market share, let's just say we're controlling 31%, that means there's a stronger likelihood that a Berkshire agent is going to show and sell your property. And usually that means we're going to have a little bit more of a friendly transaction as opposed to like this adversarial, my buyer, my seller. And so it's important because you're conveying to the client why they want to use the best in the business, not just because we're number one, but what does that mean to them and what do they get out of it? And I think it's important to, dig down just a little bit further with that.
So that market share slide that's in that presentation is phenomenal. And I use it in every presentation. And one of the biggest reasons that I use it, if this potential client is even considering interviewing another agent from another company, by the time I'm finished explaining that slide, hopefully they've, made a decision not to interview any other agent unless it's from Berkshire Hathaway. When we show them here in Lancaster that we double our next competitor's volume, I think perception is everything. And when folks are hearing companies' names or seeing their signs, they assume they do X amount of business and they're a great company. But when you slide that market share slide in front of them, it's like, oh, wow, they don't do as much as I thought they did. There's another great slide in that presentation that's on Home Sale Center. It has a home in the middle, and it kind of has a pinwheel that shows each marketing piece that we do. I thoroughly go over that. And like Mark said, many folks aren't reading print advertising anymore, but I want to let the client know that we are not going to necessarily neglect any avenue. Oh, well, people don't drive by houses anymore. They find everything online. I'm still going to use a yard sign, like just in case. So I make sure that they know that we're doing everything on this pinwheel and we're really holding nothing back.
Awesome. Somebody also chimed in. Now, this is kind of getting away from marketing. How are you responding when somebody challenges your commission?
Showing value. Whatever you have in your toolbox that can show the value. Yes, we charge an X amount of percent for a commission. Here's what you get in exchange for that commission. And if, in my opinion, if you can't convey that value to the seller, maybe you shouldn't get that commission. Really, what do you bring to the table? And that's what they want to know. You know, they'll pay the percentage of commission. They'll pay it if you show them that they're getting something for that money.
Yeah.
So I think, give me 1 second. So Shane, I think it's great that you said that. Before Mark chimes in and kind of layers on, how often are you guys even getting asked that question?
Every time. I think it comes up every time. I think the client knows, you know, there's an industry standard commission, but they always ask, what's the commission? And then they'll ask if there's any room for negotiation. And I usually blow that comment off. I take it as a joke. And if they push it further, then we'll go into that conversation. But letting them know, and the listing presentation is huge for this. By the time I'm done with the listing presentation, hopefully they understand what they're getting for that money. And if I haven't answered that question during the presentation, then I'd be happy to talk about it. But yeah, it comes up all the time.
So I like to get in front of it. I just recently started doing this. So I actually, as part of my presentation, I have the companies that will do a 5% commission, the 6%, the 7%, the help you sell for like the flat rate. I'm bringing that up in part of my presentation because I want to get in front of it. And the reason why I do that is that way they realize that there's a sliding scale with this. But the number one way to overcome this commission, whether it's someone coming in at 5% or whatever it is I work out my list price to sale price ratio, which is right now right around 99.1%. Now I cover it over 3 years because if I did it for 1 year, it's even going to be higher. But I don't think it like I'm almost embarrassed that it's that high because people don't think they're going to believe it, you know, when they're like that. But so I point out what my list price to sale price ratio is. And then I point out what the average other company will be doing. And so it usually works out to be about 94% with the other company. So if I'm getting 5% more in the sale price, even if they're paying 1% more for me as a commission, they're still getting 4% more out of the sale of their house by working with me. And I take that 4% doesn't sound like a lot, but when it's a $300,000 house, I put it in, I said, on average, guys, you're going to get $12,000 more when you work with me than you would with somebody else that's going to do a discount rated, you know, commission. And, you know, again, that's a great statistic where numbers don't lie. And so you break down, even if you have to write it down, what their breakdown would be at the 5% or what their breakdown would be with us. It's just, I've never had anybody really like argue it because they're making more money with us, even though the 1% differential. So that's just a great way. And I always get out in front of it because I don't want someone coming back and Shane, you know, when someone says, is it negotiable? I say, well, to be very honest, it is negotiable, but I've already come down from 7 to 6% and didn't even ask for your approval on that. So let's go back to 7 and we can negotiate down to 6 if that makes you feel better. So, you know, and of course they all laugh, you know, but yeah, if you use your list price to sale price ratio, and let's just say you don't even have a great list price to sale price ratio, go into what Berkshire's list price to sale price ratio is for that development or for that price range. And then go look what the competitors are. And it's a great tool to have because you'll show them that they get more money in the end.
Mark, how are you pulling those list price to sale price ratios for other brokers?
Just in the MLS. It's super simple. Now, when you look at stats, like if you look at like, I don't know about Lancaster or not, but when you look at like York County stats and they're saying they're getting 99.2%, they're not calculating the closing cost being paid for. So I think Lisa made a good point. Go in and do your market statistics and then go in and see what everything is sold for, but then go in and see what the average closing cost has been paid on because it's going to be part of that spreadsheet. So make sure you factor that closing cost back into it because that'll bring down the sale price ratio because it's the truth, you know, so, but yeah, MLS.
I rarely have a problem or even a question about commission. Of course, it comes up from time to time, but what happens more often with me is in my presentation, I explain the use of professional photography, the use of professional video, a consultation with the stager, and more often by the end they're saying, well, who pays for all of those things? I say, I pay for those, and then there's no issue at all about the commission.
Because you're already offering so much value.
They see the value. Yeah.
Sorry, I hear some kind of alarm going off in my building. I don't know what it is. I'm like, oh.
That means time's up.
I don't know. It stopped. It stopped, but I'm like, do I take my laptop and evacuate? I'm not sure. Okay, so one question that it's kind of a twofold, and I skipped it, so I want to circle back and make sure I don't miss it. When you guys are touring the property and you're walking around, and some of you have mentioned taking notes, some of you said not taking notes, have you ever taken photos? Like as you're kind of walking through the property, instead of taking notes, just so you can remember, have you ever taken that approach with it?
Historically, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go, Shane.
I personally try not to take my cell phone out during my appointment.
Okay.
I either try to take notes on an iPad or just a legal pad. I try to leave my phone out of reach. Even if I am taking notes on my phone, the perception can be that I'm not paying attention. I have tried to take pictures as to replace taking notes. And when I asked permission to take photos, the seller had a meltdown and like they weren't ready for pictures. And so I kind of got away from that. I tried to explain to them that they're for my personal notes and they didn't
not
like
gonna matter.
Yeah, they didn't like it. So I try to avoid bringing out my phone if at all possible.
Okay. And then, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, 100%. Don't take any photos while you're walking through, only because, in my opinion, as you said, they're not ready, or it shows, if you can't remember what you just saw in the last 30 minutes, you're sort of shit out of luck, because if you got to refer to that photo, it's like, wow, this person can't remember this. But, and I think someone asked about, do you do your measurements then?
Yeah,
you 100% don't do any measurements until after the listing is signed. And, now there's this huge caveat. If you're doing a relocation, BMA or ERC form, then that's a different story. But 99.9% of the time, don't do any photos unless you're going to do something like, one of my key things that I do, paint color on shutters is one of my biggest pet peeves. And it's the cheapest way to make something look so much better. So, but I'll take a picture of it when I leave so they don't even know it. And then I'll Photoshop it to make it look, like the colors that I want. And I'll send it to them and say, hey, would you be opposed if your house looked like this in the front, but don't take pictures while you're walking through. Or at least I don't.
I make my photographer get my room measurements for me, and I pay him to do it. Yeah.
Awesome. That's a great idea. Okay. So when it comes to pricing and you're giving your pricing recommendation, they want to overprice it. How are you overcoming that?
Brutal honesty. I think that's the best policy when someone wants to price their home over what you consider to be fair market value. We have a great graphic in the home sales center in that listing presentation that shows time on market in relation to sale price and how it deviates over time or drops over time and by what percent. That's another great slide. Hey, look, we can price your home at whatever you want, but here's what is most likely to happen if we do so. And that's it. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah, I think that's called dangers of overpricing or something across the top.
That's exactly it.
I'm the king. I love to use past experiences or examples. So if you guys don't have an example of an overpriced listing in your past, just call me because I got a ton of them so I can send them your way. But so I utilize to say, hey, you know what? Obviously, we want to get you the most for the amount. We want to get the most for your house because, not to sound silly, but our commission's based off of that. But the same token, the higher we price your property, the less likely we are to get your asking price. And let me just show you this scenario. And I use one of the properties where it actually got reduced by about 12%. I mean, 12% again is a ton of money. And so instead of using these little 3%, 4%, equate it to the number. And so my number one line is I say, I would rather price your house on the nose and not negotiate off of the asking price than build it up higher and try to build in wiggle room to negotiate down. So that's like a number one thing. It's the easiest thing to say, I'd rather price it on the nose and you guys don't negotiate than building it price up higher. And then I say, if I'm too aggressive with pricing it too low, the market's going to correct it because we're going to get competing offers where it's going to bring your offer up. And then you bring, again, then you show an example, say, here's a great example in your price range when we did this. And so that's the key, and you have to just show what a price reduction is going to look like. And, I point out that my hottest time to sell your property is in the first 3 to 5 weeks. And if I get past 5 weeks and we're not getting the showings, or we're getting the showings and not getting the offers, that is a clear indication one of 3 things is an issue: price, condition, or description of your property online. And so, you go through and do the process elimination, it's always price, so that's the way.
Lisa, anything you would add or say slightly differently at all?
I think they covered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One question came in. Has a seller ever asked for you to go room by room in recommending what they should do to get ready or help sell? Kind of walk us through a scenario like that.
Yeah, that's my big key differentiator, what I point out versus my competition, people at my, production level and different things like that. I actually basically set up, and this is sort of at the end of the listing presentation, because I say, here's what happens next. Once you guys sign on the listing agreement, I'm going to go through room by room and give you a punch list of how to get your house camera ready. And so that's just a great differentiator between somebody else, because a lot of times some realtors may just send in their stager, which the majority of homes don't need staged. They just need decluttered. And so you should be able, whether you can take a course on how to, counsel people to get ready, their house ready or not. I think it's a huge differentiator. And so I do that only after the listing appointment, and get the listing signed. And so most people will say, do you want me to walk through with you? And I say, you can either walk through with me and make notes, or I can walk through on my own and make notes, which to me is a lot better because I can rifle through, make the notes, type it up, and send it to them. And it's just a great to-do list before they get the camera ready.
I'm a big proponent of sending the stager to do that. The stager takes 2 hours, give or take, goes room by room and creates a punch list for the sellers, or the sellers can hire the stager to do additional things. That way, all of the advice is coming from someone besides me. So sometimes if it's about something sensitive, like their favorite wallpaper or room color, or, what they spent a fortune on 20 years ago, I think the stager does a really nice job at presenting it. And it just adds another person to my team supporting the process.
Yep, I love that. That kind of helps with, I know when you guys did this in person, we had like a portrait situation that came up where I think there was a nude portrait that the seller refused to take down. So having a stager kind of support that conversation would be helpful too. So let's say that you guys are doing that after it's getting signed, which is definitely the way to go. But what if somebody's coming to you saying, hey, we want to be able to rip up carpet, we want to paint, we want to do X, Y, Z. So we're not ready to list yet. We need to finish a couple projects first. What's that conversation look like for you guys?
I typically, I want to know what they're planning on doing. And my first question is, why are you doing this? Or what is the goal of that? If they want to rip up carpet and put down a new carpet or a different flooring because they want to maximize price, I'm going to try to overcome that objection. Personally, I don't like my sellers doing a whole lot of work to prepare for a listing unless it's necessary. If the carpet is beyond saving or it's really terrible, I tell them not to do anything. And my biggest concern is if the seller spends, $5,000, $10,000 on preparing the property for sale, the seller's going to want to add that $10,000 to our asking price or more to recover that cost. And I'm not prepared to do that. And it's not plausible. It's just
Yeah,
not
it's
plausible.
their best interest.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing as little work as necessary to prepare. So finding out why, is it a price? Are you concerned that if the floors look like this, you're going to get a lower offer? Is that your concern? Finding out why that's important for them to do that is important. And then I always ask them, well, are you going to replace all the floors? And once the floors are replaced, are you going to repaint? Once you repaint, are you going to change out the light fixtures? Where do we stop preparing your home for sale? And how can we possibly guess what hundreds of thousands of onlookers online are going to want or like?
Yeah.
So I try to talk them out of that if at all possible.
Yeah, that ties back to the very first questions I asked before I get there. Say, hey, what are things that you guys think you wanted to do before you get the house camera ready? Because again, the number one thing that you want to avoid is have them go through, and like a good example is exactly what Shane said, have them go through and put in this nasty like beige carpet that looks, like it's indoor outdoor rug that they got at like Weckers for 99 cents, because you want to be the advisor. They're looking at you for the advice. And I'm in agreement with Shane. I don't want to spend any money unless I can get double that investment back out. So that's a huge number. So if I'm going to spend $5, I want to get 10 grand more out of the price. I'll give you a great example. So I was competing against another realtor on a listing, and it was into my development. And they said, Mark, we want to go with you, but this other realtor has us putting in a new roof. I'm like, oh my God, you guys, and the roof's about $12,000. I said, under no circumstances put a new roof on here. We can negotiate it as we get through the transaction. I said, we'll probably have enough interest here that someone's willing to inherit that roof. And it wasn't leaking, but it was at the end of its useful age and everybody else was getting new roofs, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So we didn't put on the new roof. They were going to spend 12 grand. We went through the whole inspection and everything, and I negotiated it $2 grand out of their pocket. So I saved them $10,000 just by, advising them that way. But it's, the key is make sure that you're the advisor of how to get the house camera and showing ready, not them.
Yep, absolutely. Shane had to run. He had a settlement. But before, I want to keep going a little bit longer because I think there are a couple other questions that people are hanging on to. I know you're going to be okay. Mark's like, my ADD is killing me. I haven't highlighted anything yet.
If you can see what's around me, I look like NASA. I've got my iPad, my iPhone. Oh my gosh.
One thing I would love for you guys to just kind of touch on is setting expectations. So you're sitting there, the paperwork's signed. How do you set expectations so that the seller has an idea of what are the next steps? What does our communication look like? Just kind of set those expectations for us.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So, it's important to try to set the stage for the seller about how showings occur, what are some of the negative things that happen at the time of showing, what does feedback look like, how they're going to receive feedback. If you can get ahead of any concerns that come up during the listing process, that is definitely best. And I think it's a balance during the listing process of communicating enough but not over communicating. I know in the past, sometimes if I didn't have much to report and I was still reporting back to sellers, I think that became a little frustrating for them, like to get a communication from me about nothing. So now I try to, I'm very on top of providing feedback after showings, about providing feedback after open houses. I try to at least touch base with them, once a week, but not, nothing's happening, and also not too many excuses about what's happening in the market.
Right.
Yeah, for me, so at the end of the listing presentation, as I get closer, one of my nice lines I like to say is, okay, guys, so here's what happens next. You guys, discuss whether or not you think I'm the right fit for you. And frankly, if you guys know that now, I've prepared to bring paperwork if you want to get that out of the way. But then I give them a breakdown of what are the next steps, and sometimes if I know they're a little apprehensive, I don't push for the signature. Matter of fact, I almost rarely push for the signature on the same night unless they've said, Mark, let's go, we want to sign. Because I want them to know that I'm going to let them deliberate and go over it. And so I give them a step-by-step. Here's what would happen next. If you agree I'm your agent, We'll set up a meeting for us to go over the listing appointment, and we'll do the walkthrough. We'll schedule a time for the camera, for the shoot. Here's what happens once the pictures are done. So I give them a nice little timeline as to how long it's going to take to get their house on the market. And that's one of the things that I'll leave with them, in the folder. But it's so important. It's so hard. Like once you do this great presentation, you like get to the end, you're like, ta-da! Like,
right.
What do we do? So, one of the great things to say, okay, guys, so if you like what I had to say, here's what will happen next. And that's just a great way for you. So you're not asking for the business, it's just say, here's what's going to happen next. We'd set up a time, blah, 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 blah. It's just a nice way to say, so are you guys ready to list or, with me, I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of like the cheesy clothes and, stuff like that. So I find that that's a nice tie into it, but definitely have something for them because some clients, they really want to be handheld through the transaction. And I'm not a great hand holder by nature. So I need outlines to give to them. So it keeps me, going and write down the list. And so they're going to want to make sure like, how does this all fit in? And then, the more you can schedule in terms of the dates and when the sign goes in the yard, the better off you're going to be.
Okay. Lisa, what does that close look like for you and anything that you do as a leave behind?
When I'm finished, I think less is more. So I've done all sorts of things over the years, but what I leave with them now is just a simple Berkshire Hathaway folder with a summary of my marketing outline so that if they are interviewing other agents, they can refer to that. My business card, sometimes information about a warranty or a contractor if they asked for it. So it's, and sometimes I'll print out some of the bird's eye view stats and leave them in there so they can relook at those. But it's pretty simple. I always follow up with a handwritten thank you note immediately. So yeah, I'm not doing any like cheesy closing tactics. And most of the time I do have, it is a 2-appointment process. But during that first phone call when I'm setting up the appointment, occasionally someone is ready and they don't want to delay. It's good to know that right away. And then I'll come with all of the paperwork and we'll get it signed. Otherwise it's just a polite ending, a follow-up. And if I don't hear from them, after the thank you card, I call and I check in and see what their timing is.
Okay. Any other things? You guys, well, I'm going to kind of scan through to make sure I didn't miss any questions. While I'm doing that, think of kind of what you want to leave everybody with like your biggest piece of advice, your biggest tip, what you feel like you've either done or changed that has kind of impacted you the most. Okay, so Mark, you got Trisha's question. Somebody asked regarding carpet, when you're looking at higher end properties, what do you recommend for carpet?
Yeah, Becky, I just typed back, but so
there you go.
It all depends on what the condition of the entire house is. If the entire house looks awesome, but the carpet's nasty, then I'll get like a medium range carpet installed because then it sort of buttons the whole thing up. However, in higher end properties, if the kitchen and baths are dated, don't even worry about the carpeting because at that stage, they're going to replace it anyway. Higher end properties are difficult because the majority of the clientele is going to want an inlaid hardwood floor, or ceramic tile as opposed to just carpet. But it's really going to hinder on what's the condition of the rest of the house.
Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, I think we hit all of the questions. If we missed any, please type them back in because then that means I totally missed them as we kind of continue to expand. But I think we hit all the questions. One last tip, piece of advice, anything else that you guys want to share that maybe you didn't get a chance to yet?
I think the most simple advice, because that's like a pretty loaded question, but it's just to really be present and listen during your meeting with the sellers and not go and just sort of recite the same old process, because every interaction is going to be different and you're definitely going to connect with people better if you're spending more time listening than talking.
Yeah, I don't know if I could say that any better because the number one thing is we all have different personalities and we have different approaches to the business. So if you're trying to be something you're not, it comes across so inauthentic and they'll see right through you. But the number one thing, if I could tell anybody that is sort of nervous about going on listing appointments or they haven't had success closing listing appointments, literally just do a role reversal. Put yourself in their position as to what are the most important things that you want to know about this meeting. You know, again, people want to know price. And so the more you can substantiate information backing your price, the better off you are. And then secondly, people want to make sure that you respect and appreciate their house as much as they have. You know, rarely do I have somebody call me and say, oh, my house, you know, is a hog style. I just want to sell it. You know, everybody's proud of their place, whether you'd be proud of it or not. So just remember, this is more of a question and answer meeting as opposed to a presentation. Presentations are so brutal to the modern individual because their attention span, what is it, like the frog has a longer attention span, Jen? What's that story?
I don't know. I have a high D, high I personality, so yeah. I can't even get myself past the word presentation. Yeah. One of the years, and again, here's my plug for a convention. One of the times I was in convention, I was in a session and we were talking about listing presentations, and some of the speaker had said, don't even use the word presentation because depending on personalities, with mine being that personality, I immediately go, okay, this is going to be painful. So maybe it's a listing consultation, a marketing consultation, a pricing proposal. Like, I loved what you guys said about the listening and it being more questions. And to me, questions means identifying pain points. And then, like Mark, you had said, well, I use slides as my crutch because it's not a presentation. Like what Mark was saying to me was, you all said we're asking questions, and then Mark using that as a crutch is when he identified the pain point through that question, that's what he was using to explain and overcome that pain point. So yeah, maybe it's a marketing proposal if that's the pain point, or if it's price, it's a pricing proposal or a pricing consultation. So we use the word presentation, but I don't know that that's the best word for a consumer and a potential
I call it a
seller.
I call it a seller consult. So a seller consultation. Yep. So like if they book like on one of my Calendly links, like if they want to book a seller consultation, that's what it is, you know? Yep. So
I love that.
But yeah, I mean, the number one thing in this world of like scripts and everybody telling you to like rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, the number one thing just to do is rehearse yourself. You know, how would you want to be presented to and how are you most comfortable? And then the final thing is you have to have something that differentiates yourself from everybody else. And if you can't figure that out, continue to look, because you want to make sure that you come up with at least 3 big points of what makes you different than almost any other realtor. And there are 3 different points, trust me. You just have to figure it out.
All right. Thank you guys. I think that was the best possible last pieces of advice that you guys could have ended on. We did record this. I will make sure by the end of the day today that recording is homesaleCenter.com, Team Home Sale, and then it'll be in the home sale training folder. I will also send out the link, and I will chat with these guys and Shane, and if there are any handouts, things that they're willing to share, I will also include those with the link to the recording. So happy Monday. Have a great week. And Lisa, Mark, and Shane, who had to sign off, thank you so much for.
Cool. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right.